And a new Leger poll suggests the federal Liberals and Conservatives are running neck and neck in voter support. The poll of Canadians' voting intentions released this week has both parties sitting at 37%. The survey was conducted online and cannot be assigned a margin of error. It shows a drop of 6 points for the Conservatives and a 7% jump for Liberals since February 24th, while the NDP is down 2 points to 11%. Leger surveyed 1,548 Canadians between March 7th and March 10th, which means the poll wrapped up just after the Liberals picked Mark Carney as their new party leader. We're now joined by Andrew Enns, Executive Vice President at Leger. Andrew, thanks for joining us today.
Great to be with you, Theresa.
Now, based on your polling, it looks like we're in for a much tighter election than anyone had kind of expected. Can you walk us through just how quickly Liberal support has bounced back?
Well, yeah, certainly. I think we all sort of went into the Christmas break and New Year's thinking that we're entering an election year and it was going to be a rather boring a boring event, and suddenly we are not in a boring event at all. There's Look, liberal fortunes started to change not very far after Donald Trump started to saber rattle around trade tariffs, Canada becoming a 51st state. And that suddenly got Canadians' attention and very quickly changed the dynamic in terms of sort of the national sentiment.
Now, do you think a lot of it is driven on the fact that Donald Trump has made these tariff threats, or do you think that Trudeau resigning has been a large factor in the response for Liberal support?
For sure, I actually break it down into sort of three sort of factors here. The Donald Trump in the trade tariff threats, the trade war, the 51st state has really amped up national pride, anger in the population, and it's completely taken Canadians' attention away from the internal state of what the government and Canada, and suddenly it's a rally to arms, and I think that's actually had a very big impact. It's also then the second thing I would say, it's also put the government in a space where they're now confronting Donald Trump, retaliatory tariffs. We've got to take this on. We've got to stand united. This is the first time the Canadian government, the Liberal government, has actually been on a message that a huge majority of Canadians are supporting. It's been, I'd argue, probably 7 or 8 years, since they've been a really positive message in terms of Canadian attitudes. So that's helped them in terms of help that Liberal brand. And then I would say the third thing, and you alluded it to, Theresa, is the change in some personalities, the departure of a very unpopular leader, Mr. Trudeau. Although I think he's probably wishing he might have had to wait 10 days. He might have been in a different situation. But nonetheless, his departure and then the arrival on a new figure into the scene, Mr. Carney, a figure that I would say is known to Canadians, but not well known. And the description they get is, it's reasonable at this stage. Former Bank of Canada, former Bank of England, economist, those are all good things. And so that's helped attract some support as well. So three factors, perfect timing, and we've got ourselves a real barn burner of an election, I think, coming up.
Now, we've talked about the increase in support, but where is this support coming from? Are they peeling voters away from the Conservatives, or is it the NDP, or is it both?
Well, it started with the NDP. We started to see the liberals slowly creep up, from what we were traditionally had them at in our Leger polling around 22-23%. They started to creep up to those high 20s, and that looked like it was largely at the expense of the NDP. The NDP now are down around that low teens.
Mhm.
But now I would say the last 2 to 3 weeks, we started to see some erosion in that conservative support. So there's a bit of support now being drawn from conservative voters. They're now switching and kind of heading into that liberal camp. I will say, I think this is a fairly dynamic and fluid situation in the country, and I think this campaign is like most campaigns, but I think this one in particular, the campaign is going to be quite important for both party leaders.
So, your polling shows that only 29% of Canadians want the current government to form the next government, and yet 37% support the Liberals. How do we make sense of that gap?
Well, I think quite frankly, it's the fact that there is a lot of competing issues and topics out there for vying for voter attention. I
Mhm.
mean, we, you know, how it manifests in our vote, Teresa, in terms of the Trump tariffs and his aggressive behavior towards Canada is really going to be interesting to see. And I think it is actually something that can move, throughout the campaign. But I do think that you've got the government doing the right things, defending Canada, rallying the troops, retaliatory tariffs. So there's some, there's positivity there, but there is also this not that far back in a lot of Canadians' subconscious is that this was a government that had been around for 9 years. There were lots of problems. There's still lots of problems. So I'm not sure. So I think that's really where this campaign is going to be a tug of war of whose narrative can win the day.
Now, you did mention that the Liberal Party having a new face in Mark Carney could have played a factor in the bump that the Liberals have seen. But how common is it for a party to see a polling bump after a new leader is elected?
Well, it's not uncommon. If for myself, I'm probably dating myself here, but I was around the days of Mr. Mulrooney when he was quite unpopular and left the scene, and there was a fairly vigorous race between two new young conservative, progressive conservatives, and Kim Campbell won the day, and she actually reversed Tory polling trends quite dramatically over those summer months when she was in power, only to see that disappear as quickly as it came. We saw similar with Mr. Turner when he took over for Mr. Trudeau. When we've seen a bit of that in provincial politics, but you can also sometimes not see those bumps. It all
Mhm.
depends in terms of the other situation around, like in Manitoba, where I'm currently at. There was a leadership change there in that government, and it didn't really make much change in the polling fortune. So it's a bit of a wild card, but I would say for the Liberal Party of Canada, where they were at the end of 2024, I think they would love the fact that they're in a bit of a wild card situation
Mhm.
now in terms of it could go either way because it was only going to go one way at the end of 2024 for that party electorally.
Right now, there is a lot of speculation on when the next election is going to be. Based on your polling, what do Canadians want? Do they want an election in the spring?
Well, I think, we asked that question in terms of immediately or, an election in April, May, and we've got almost 50% are saying, spring or earlier. So I think there's a large percentage of Canadians that actually are anxious to get going to the polls. Uh, Quite frankly, Teresa, I think if the election's called, I think you'll get more questions from the public if an election is not called quickly. Because I think there's just been a lot of talk about this in the media. The question around Mr. Trump and these tariffs, we've heard provincial premiers talk about the need for a federal government with a new, strong, stable mandate. I do think that if things drag on too long, you actually might get a backlash of people wondering like, what are we waiting for? We need to get this done.
Well, Andrew, thank you so much for the time today.
I appreciate the conversation. I've enjoyed it.